Commander Taemin called an emergency meeting of all the senior researchers. The evidence they had gathered painted a picture of humanity that filled every alien species on the station with absolute terror. The peaceful explorers who had joined Galactic civilization 20 years ago were revealed to be the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever seen. "We have to warn the Galactic Council immediately," said Dr. So-Young. Her voice was urgent and full of fear. "Every species in known space is in terrible danger. The humans are not just more advanced than us. They have been planning to conquer or destroy all of us from the very beginning." The research teams began preparing to leave the station immediately with their findings. They would carry warnings to every world in the galaxy. They would tell their governments and military leaders about the terrible truth they had discovered. They would try to organize some kind of defense against the coming human invasion. But as they prepared to leave, they discovered something that filled them with complete and total dread. Something that made them realize their situation was even worse than they had imagined. Dr. Kai-wook was doing final checks on the human ship's systems when he found transmission logs hidden deep in the communication computers. As he read through these logs, his face went pale with horror, and his tentacle arms began to shake uncontrollably. "They have known we were here all along," he whispered to the other researchers. "The human ship's automated systems have been recording everything since we first boarded. Every conversation we had, every discovery we made, every classified piece of information we found. All of it has been transmitted in real time to human intelligence services. The implications were staggering and terrifying. If humans could manipulate an entire galactic research expedition so easily, what else were they capable of? How many other discoveries had been carefully orchestrated by human intelligence agents? How many alien governments had already been compromised by human spies? The researchers realized with growing horror that they had not been conducting independent scientific research. They had been unwitting participants in humanity's psychological warfare campaign. The fear and terror they felt was exactly what humans wanted other species to experience. Dr. Heejin discovered additional evidence that made their situation even worse. The human ship had not been abandoned or lost as they had originally thought. It had been deliberately placed in their path. Human intelligence had known their research expedition was coming to this sector of space. They had positioned the ship where it would be found and had filled it with exactly the information they wanted the aliens to discover. Everything they had learned was part of a carefully planned human operation. The outdated technology that had amazed them was meant to show alien species how far behind they were. The historical records of human wars were meant to demonstrate human capacity for violence and destruction. The strategic planning documents were meant to show that resistance was futile. But worst of all, the researchers realized that they were not the first alien team to make this discovery. The ship's logs showed that dozens of other research expeditions from different species had found similar human ships over the years. Each team had made the same discoveries. Each team had felt the same terror. Each team had tried to warn their governments, but these warnings had been ignored or dismissed or discredited. Human agents working within alien governments had made sure that reports about human military capabilities were not taken seriously. The few alien leaders who had tried to organize resistance had disappeared, or suffered accidents or been removed from power through political manipulation. The human psychological warfare campaign was not just about making aliens afraid. It was about making them feel hopeless and powerless. It was about convincing them that resistance was impossible and that surrender was their only option. As evacuation alarms began sounding throughout the research station, the teams realized they were no longer conducting scientific research. They had become unwitting actors in humanity's final preparation for conquest. The fear they carried back to their home worlds would spread to other species and weaken their resolve to fight. Some researchers chose to flee. They analyzed a human battleship. What they found made them curious. They left terrified. The morning started like any other Tuesday in Seoul until the shadows fell across the city. Commander Park Hyun-woo was drinking his coffee when his aide burst into the office with wide eyes and shaking hands. The young officer could barely speak as he pointed toward the window. Park Hyun-woo walked to the window and looked up. His coffee cup slipped from his fingers and crashed to the floor. Above the city floated massive ships that blocked out the sun. Each ship was easily the size of 10 city blocks. Their dark metal hulls gleamed with strange lights, and the air around them shimmered with energy. Within an hour, every military base on Earth was on high alert. The ships had appeared simultaneously over major cities around the world. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, and dozens of other capitals now lived in the shadow of alien vessels. The world held its breath and waited. The aliens made contact at exactly noon Korean time. Their message came through every radio, television, and internet connection on the planet at once. The voice that spoke was deep and rumbling with an accent. That sounded like rocks grinding together. "We are the Vorthan Empire. We have come to claim this world as our own. Prepare your leaders for surrender negotiations." 3 hours later, a smaller ship descended to the main military compound outside Seoul. The ship landed with grace despite its enormous size. Steam hissed from vents along its sides as a ramp extended to the ground. The first alien to emerge was clearly their leader. General Keth stood nearly 8 feet tall with purple skin that looked like leather. He had 4 muscular arms, each ending in hands with 6 fingers. His armor was made of some kind of metal that seemed to flow like liquid while staying solid. Behind him came 20 more aliens, all armed with weapons that hummed with energy. Commander Park Hyun-woo led the human delegation. With him were Colonel Han So-young, Lieutenant Lee Bo-ram, and Sergeant Kim Da-eun. They wore their best dress uniforms and carried standard military rifles. The contrast between the two groups was striking. General Keth looked at the humans and began to laugh. The sound was like thunder rolling across the mountains. His forearms shook as he pointed at their weapons. The other Vorthan soldiers joined in the laughter until the air rang with their mirth. "These are your warriors," the alien general asked between fits of laughter. "These tiny creatures with toy weapons." Lieutenant Lee Bo-ram stepped forward, her face red with anger. "Size does not determine strength," she said through gritted teeth. Keth laughed even harder. "Little human child, your entire species could not harm a single Vorthan infant." He gestured to one of his soldiers who raised an energy weapon, the size of a human torso. "This is what real weapons look like." The alien soldier aimed at a concrete wall 50 meters away and fired. The beam of red energy struck the wall and turned it to vapor in seconds. The heat from the blast made the humans step back. Where the wall had been, there was now nothing but empty air and glowing sand. Sergeant Kim Da-eun looked at her rifle and then at the alien weapons. Her weapon seemed like a toy in comparison. The alien energy cannons were massive, complex devices that glowed with internal power. Her rifle was just metal and plastic that fired small metal bullets. General Keth walked closer to the humans. His massive form cast them in shadow. "We have conquered 1,000 worlds," he said with pride. "We have defeated species with technology far beyond what you possess. Some had energy weapons, some had quantum shields, some had ships that could destroy planets. All fell before the might of the Vorthan Empire." He gestured toward the city where millions of people were probably watching from their windows. "Your people cower in fear, and rightly so. We could turn your cities to ash with a single command. Your primitive projectile weapons could not even scratch the paint on our ships." Colonel Han So-young spoke up, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "What do you want from us?" Keth smiled, showing teeth like white daggers. "Surrender. Complete and immediate surrender. Your planet will become part of our empire. Your people will serve us. Some will be relocated to work camps, others will remain to maintain basic services. Resistance is futile and will only result in unnecessary death." Commander Park Hyun-woo felt his hands clench into fists. We need time to consider your offer. The alien general laughed again. Consider. There is nothing to consider. You will surrender, or we will take your world by force. I give you 24 hours to make the wise choice. Tomorrow at this time we will demonstrate our power on one of your military installations. Then you will see what happens to those who oppose the Vorthon Empire. The aliens began walking back toward their ship. General Keth paused and turned back to the humans. Do not think about running or hiding. Our sensors can track every human on this planet. Do not think about fighting. Your weapons are useless against our technology. Accept your fate with dignity and your deaths will be quick. The alien ship lifted into the air and rejoined the massive fleet hovering over Seoul. The humans stood in silence for several minutes, processing what had just happened. Around the world, similar meetings were taking place with the same results. Humanity had 24 hours before the aliens would begin their conquest. In secret bunkers around the globe, emergency meetings began immediately. World leaders, scientists, and military commanders worked frantically through the night. Most civilians went to bed expecting to wake up as slaves to an alien empire. They had seen the demonstration of Vorthon power and knew their conventional weapons were useless. But in the deepest levels of classified military installations, something else was happening. Dr. Choi Min-ho gathered his research team in a bunker 300 feet underground. For 30 years, they had been working on projects so secret that most world leaders did not know they existed. The aliens think our guns are small, Dr. Choi said as he activated security screens around the room. They have no idea what humans do when we are desperate. They have no idea what we have been preparing for since we first looked at the stars and wondered if we were alone. His team began pulling up files and blueprints that had never been seen outside this room. Weapons that violated several laws of physics, technology that should have been impossible, systems that had been built and tested in complete secrecy for decades. The Vorthon Empire had conquered 1,000 worlds by being stronger and more advanced than their enemies. But they had never faced a species that specialized in fighting enemies who were stronger and more advanced. They had never fought humans who had spent generations preparing for exactly this scenario. Tomorrow would bring the first test of humanity's greatest secret. The aliens would learn why underestimating human creativity was the last mistake many species ever made. Dawn came too early over the desert of Nevada, where humanity would witness alien power firsthand. Captain Yoon Tae-ho stood on a ridge 5 miles from the abandoned Groom Lake military facility. Through his binoculars, he watched Vorthon ships descend like dark angels ready to deliver judgment. The aliens had chosen this location carefully, far from civilian populations but close enough that every government on Earth could watch through satellites and drones. General Keth wanted the world to see what happened to those who dared resist the Vorthon Empire. 3 massive Vorthon battleships positioned themselves in a triangle formation above the military base. The base had been abandoned for years, but still contained aircraft hangars, weapons storage facilities, and armored vehicles. Everything needed to demonstrate the futility of human military power. General Keth's voice boomed across all communication frequencies on the planet. People of Earth witnessed the power of the Vorthon Empire. Your leaders have 12 hours remaining to surrender. This demonstration shows what will happen to those who choose resistance over wisdom. The first blast came from the center ship. A beam of plasma energy as thick as a redwood tree lanced down from the sky. Where it touched the main hangar, the building simply ceased to exist. The concrete, steel, and everything inside turned to superheated gas in less than a second. The shockwave shattered windows 50 miles away. Captain Yoon Tae-ho felt the heat on his face, despite being 5 miles from the target. His radio crackled with reports from observers around the world. Similar demonstrations were beginning over military targets on every continent. The message was clear and terrifying. The second ship fired at a row of abandoned fighter jets. The energy beams swept across the aircraft like a broom sweeping dust. $1 million war machines became nothing but glowing vapor. The third ship targeted the weapons storage bunkers. The explosions that followed lit up the morning sky like a second sunrise. In 10 minutes, the entire military complex was gone. Where once stood buildings, vehicles, and equipment, now lay only a crater of melted sand turned to glass. The heat was so intense that the glass glowed red for hours afterward. Dr. Song Ji-hai watched the demonstration from a secure bunker in Colorado. Around her, dozens of scientists and engineers worked at computer terminals that displayed readings and calculations. She had spent 15 years developing technology that the world thought was impossible. The aliens are right about conventional weapons, she told her team as they watched the destruction. Their ships could destroy our entire military without taking a single casualty. But they do not understand human innovation. They do not understand that sometimes the best weapon is one that your enemy cannot detect. Half a world away in a bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Lim Jae-won made final adjustments to equipment that had never been tested at full power. Banks of quantum computers hummed as they calculated trajectories and energy frequencies. 30 years of research, he whispered to his assistant. 30 years of preparation for this exact moment. The technology was based on theories that most scientists thought were pure fantasy. Weapons that could phase through normal space weapons that could bypass any known defense system. Weapons that could strike targets from dimensions that aliens had never imagined existed. Sergeant Major Kang Soo-jin trained her Special Forces unit in an underground facility in South Korea. These soldiers had been selected for abilities that went far beyond normal military training. They could operate equipment that required both physical skill and mental discipline that few humans possessed. Remember, she told her team as they checked weapons that looked identical to standard military rifles the enemy expects us to fight. Like every other species they have conquered, they expect direct confrontation with conventional weapons. That expectation is their greatest weakness. The modified weapons her team carried looked exactly like ordinary assault rifles, even advanced. Alien sensors would read them as primitive chemical propellant firearms. But inside each weapon were components that had been grown in zero-gravity crystalline matrices that could focus quantum energy in ways that violated known physics. On the Vorthon flagship, General Keth received reports from scanning teams that had been monitoring human military installations for weeks. Their analysis confirmed what he already believed. Human weapons technology was centuries behind Vorthon standards. The human projectile weapons fire small metal slugs using chemical explosives, his science officer reported. Maximum effective range is less than 1 kilometer. Projectile velocity is subsonic. These weapons could not penetrate even our lightest personal armor. General Keth nodded with satisfaction. He had conquered species with energy weapons that could destroy mountains. He had defeated civilizations with quantum disruptors and matter conversion beams. Humans with their tiny chemical firearms would fall in hours, not days. What about their aircraft and vehicles? The general asked. Primitive beyond measure, sir. Their fastest aircraft travel at speeds our shuttles achieve without effort. Their ground vehicles use wheels instead of hover technology. Their largest weapons are chemical explosives that produce less energy than our personal sidearms. The alien commander felt almost disappointed. He had hoped for at least some challenge from this conquest. The humans seemed barely more advanced than the Stone Age primitives his empire occasionally encountered on frontier worlds. But in the deepest levels of human military installations around the globe, final preparations were being made for weapons systems that had been developed in absolute secrecy. Technology that had been tested only in computer simulations and underground laboratories, hidden from every spy satellite and scanning device. Colonel Han So-young stood with her unit on a rooftop in Tokyo, watching alien ground troops begin their preliminary landing operations. The Vorthans moved with confidence, knowing that human weapons could not harm them. Their personal armor could withstand direct hits from tank shells. Their energy shields could deflect any known projectile. They think our weapons are toys, she radioed to units positioned around the world. Tonight they will learn what human toys can really do when desperate engineers have had decades to improve them. Dr. Yang Kyung-ho had built his first quantum tunneling device 30 years ago when most scientists thought such technology was impossible. Over the decades, his team had refined the process until they could make bullets and missiles that existed partially outside normal space-time. The aliens had sensors that could detect every known form of energy and matter. But they were scanning for technology that operated within the same physical dimensions as their own. Human quantum weapons operated through space itself using principles that the Vorthan Empire had never encountered. As night fell over, the planet both sides prepared for what they believed would be a quick and decisive battle. The aliens expected easy victory over primitives with inferior weapons. The humans prepared to show the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you underestimate. In a few hours, the Vorthan Empire would learn why conquering Earth would be unlike any previous campaign. They would discover that human creativity, when combined with desperation, could produce results that defied every law of physics they knew. The real war was about to begin. The sun began its final descent over Earth as President Kim Hae-won prepared to address not just her nation, but the entire world. She stood in the secure broadcast facility deep beneath the Blue House, knowing that every human on the planet would hear her words. More importantly, the aliens would hear them too, and that was exactly what she wanted. Her speech had been carefully written by teams of psychologists and military strategists. Every word was chosen to send a specific message to the Vorthan Empire while hiding the true meaning from their translators. She smoothed her black suit jacket and stepped up to the podium as cameras began broadcasting to every screen on Earth. People of our world, she began, her voice steady and clear. The aliens who hover above our cities believe they know us. They have studied our weapons and found them small. They have observed our technology and declared it primitive. They have watched our armies and proclaimed them weak. On the Vorthan flagship, General Keth listened with amusement. He expected the human leader to beg for mercy or make empty threats. Most species did one or the other when facing conquest by the Empire. Some offered tribute, others promised surrender if their leaders were spared. But there is something about humanity they have not learned, President Kim continued. When we are threatened, we do not simply fight harder. We adapt, we innovate, we find solutions that our enemies never expect. Throughout our history, we have defeated forces that seemed impossible to overcome, not through superior strength, but through superior thinking. Deep beneath the Himalayan mountains, Dr. Bae Yoon-seo made final calibrations to systems that had taken 20 years to build. The quantum resonance chambers hummed with energy that existed partially outside normal space-time. Crystalline matrices grown in zero-gravity-focused power in ways that conventional physics said were impossible. The technology was based on discoveries made by accident during early space exploration. Scientists had noticed that certain crystal formations grown in weightless conditions could interact with quantum fields in unexpected ways. What started as curiosity about unusual mineral properties had become humanity's most closely guarded secret. We have spent decades preparing for this day, the president continued. Not preparing to fight aliens specifically, but preparing for the day when humanity would face an enemy we could not defeat through conventional means. Every challenge in our history has taught us the same lesson. Innovation beats intimidation. Intelligence beats brute force. At hidden facilities around the globe, teams of engineers worked frantically to complete systems that looked like ordinary military equipment from the outside. Inside each weapon were components that had been manufactured, using techniques that pushed human technology far beyond what any external observer would believe possible. Major General Quan Ji Ho stood in the command center buried beneath Cheyenne Mountain, watching displays that showed the positions of assets the aliens could never detect. For 50 years, humanity had been launching satellites disguised as communications equipment. Each one contained a weapon system that violated several laws of physics. The orbital weapons had been placed gradually over 5 decades. Each launch was disguised as routine satellite deployment for television, internet, or weather monitoring. The aliens had scanned every human satellite and found exactly what they expected to find: communications equipment, scientific instruments, and other primitive technology. But hidden within the conventional electronics of each satellite was a quantum beam generator capable of focusing energy through dimensions that existed parallel to normal space. The technology was based on theoretical work that most scientists considered science fiction, until Dr. No Hae-jin proved it was possible 30 years ago. Lieutenant Commander John Min-ah checked the modified weapons her unit would carry into battle. To any observer, including advanced alien scanners, the rifles looked identical to standard military firearms. The internal components were indistinguishable from conventional chemical propellant systems, using techniques that made quantum technology appear to be ordinary gunpowder. The deception had required breakthrough advances in materials, science, nanotechnology, and quantum engineering. Human bullets looked like ordinary metal projectiles, but contained cores that could phase shift between dimensions. Human explosives appeared to be conventional chemical compounds, but incorporated quantum destabilizers that could disrupt matter. At the subatomic level, we know the aliens expect us to fight like every other species they have conquered, President Kim said as she neared the end of her speech. They expect us to meet their advanced technology with our conventional weapons. They expect us to fail quickly and surrender when we realize we cannot win through normal means. In research facilities hidden beneath major cities around the world, scientists made final preparations for technologies that had been developed in absolute secrecy. Dr. Park Si-jun had created cloaking systems that made advanced weapons appear primitive to any scanning device. Dr. Song Mi-ra had developed ammunition that could tunnel through dimensions to bypass any known defense. The work had required coordination between thousands of researchers across dozens of countries over multiple decades. Every aspect had been compartmentalized so that no single person understood the full scope of human preparations. Even most world leaders knew only that secret weapons programs existed, not what they were designed to do. But they have made one critical error. President Kim concluded. They have assumed that because our weapons look small, they are weak. They have judged us by appearance rather than capability. Tonight they will learn why that was a mistake they should not have made. The broadcast ended, and the president stepped away from the podium. Around the world, human military units moved into positions they had rehearsed countless times over the years. Each soldier carried weapons that looked familiar but contained technology that would have seemed like magic to previous generations. Colonel Seo In-guk positioned his teams on rooftops in Sydney, watching alien patrols move through the streets. Below, the Vorthon soldiers moved with casual confidence, knowing that human weapons could not penetrate their armor or energy shields. They had no idea that human weapons no longer operated by the same principles they had encountered on other worlds. The aliens had scanned human equipment thoroughly and found exactly what they expected: primitive chemical firearms that fired metal, projectiles using explosive propellants. Their sensors had detected no energy weapons, no quantum disruptors, no matter conversion systems, no technology that could threaten Vorthan forces. But human scientists had learned something important about advanced scanning technology. The more sophisticated a sensor system became, the easier it was to fool with sufficiently clever deception. The aliens were looking for advanced technology, and their sensors were programmed to identify it. They were not programmed to recognize advanced technology that had been disguised as primitive equipment. As midnight approached, both sides prepared for what each believed would be a decisive engagement. The aliens expected to crush human resistance within hours using overwhelming technological superiority. The humans prepared to demonstrate why underestimating human ingenuity was a mistake that no species had ever survived making twice. In a few minutes, the Vorthan Empire would discover that conquering Earth would be unlike any previous campaign in their 1,000-world history. They would learn that humans had spent generations preparing for exactly this scenario. Most importantly, they would understand why judging a species by the apparent sophistication of their weapons was the kind of mistake that ended empires. The real war was about to begin, and everything the aliens thought they knew about human capabilities was wrong. At exactly midnight, Korean time, Private Oh Dong-min took the first shot of the real war. He lay on a hill overlooking Busan Harbor, where Vorthan ground forces had landed an hour earlier. Through his rifle scope, he watched alien soldiers patrol the docks with casual confidence. They knew human weapons could not harm them. Oh Dong-min had trained with this rifle for 3 years, but tonight was the first time it would be used in actual combat. To any observer, including the alien scanners constantly monitoring human activity, it looked identical to a standard military rifle. The metal was the same, the weight was the same, even the sound it made when fired was identical to conventional weapons. But inside the familiar-looking rifle was technology that had taken humanity 30 years to develop. The bullets looked like ordinary metal projectiles, but their cores contained crystalline matrices that could phase shift between dimensions. When fired, they existed simultaneously in normal space and in quantum dimensions that the aliens had never learned to defend against. Oh Dong-min centered his crosshairs on a Vorthan soldier 50 meters away and gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle fired with the same crack it had always made. The bullet traveled at the same speed conventional ammunition always had. But when it reached the alien soldier, something impossible happened. The projectile passed through the Vorthan energy shield as if it did not exist. It penetrated armor that should have stopped tank rounds like paper. It continued through the alien soldier and struck the soldier behind him, then the one behind that one. In less than a second, a single bullet had killed 4 enemies that conventional weapons could not have harmed at all. Around the world, similar scenes began unfolding with perfect coordination. In London, Sergeant Park Yoon-ji aimed what appeared to be a conventional rocket launcher at a Vorthan aircraft hovering above Trafalgar Square. The missile that left the launcher looked like standard military ordnance, but contained quantum destabilizers that could disrupt matter at the subatomic level. When the missile struck the alien aircraft, the results defied everything the Vorthans understood about human capabilities. Instead of bouncing harmlessly off the ship's shields, the missile passed through them and tore the aircraft apart from inside. The explosion was so complete that pieces of the ship rained down across half of London. On the Vorthan flagship, General Keth stared at tactical displays that made no sense. Human projectile weapons were somehow penetrating shields that had never been breached by any technology in the Empire's 1,000-world history. Armor that could withstand direct hits from antimatter cannons was being pierced by what appeared to be primitive metal bullets. "How is this possible?" he demanded from his science officer. "Our sensors show the humans are using the same chemical propellant weapons they have always used. Their bullets are traveling at the same velocities. Their explosives have the same energy signatures. Nothing has changed about their technology." The science officer trembled as he reported readings that violated basic physics. "Sir, the human projectiles appear to be existing in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Our shields and armor are designed to stop attacks that operate in normal, 3-dimensional space. These weapons are somehow firing through space itself." In research bunkers around Earth, scientists watched displays that showed their weapons performing exactly as theoretical models had predicted. Dr. Yang Kyung-ho had spent decades working on quantum tunneling technology that would allow projectiles to phase partially out of normal space-time. The aliens could not defend against attacks that came from dimensions they did not know existed. Lieutenant Commander John Min-ah watched her unit's small arms fire bring down aircraft that moments before had seemed invulnerable. Target the larger ships, she ordered over her radio. Show them what human engineering can really accomplish when we put our minds to it. The Vorthon ground forces began retreating in panic. Soldiers who had conquered 1,000 worlds suddenly found themselves defenseless against weapons that should not have been able to scratch their armor. Their energy shields flickered and failed under assault from projectiles that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. Captain Lee Sung-min commanded a unit positioned on the roof of a skyscraper in downtown Tokyo. Below him, alien soldiers ran for cover as human weapons tore through their ranks. The Vorthons had expected easy victory over primitives with inferior technology. Instead, they found themselves being systematically destroyed by enemies they had dismissed as harmless. But the real surprise was yet to come. As dawn broke over the Pacific, Major General Kwon Ji-ho gave the order that would change everything. From his command bunker beneath Cheyenne Mountain, he spoke into a secure communication system that connected to satellites around the globe. "All orbital units, this is Mountain Command," he said calmly. "You are cleared to engage primary targets. Show them what 50 years of preparation can accomplish." High above Earth, in satellites that the aliens had scanned dozens of times and dismissed as primitive communication equipment, weapon systems began powering up for the first time. Each satellite had been placed in orbit gradually over 5 decades. Each had been designed to look exactly like conventional technology from the outside while hiding quantum beam generators inside. Dr. Bae-Yoon Seo had developed the orbital weapons using principles that most scientists still considered theoretical. Quantum energy focused through crystalline matrices grown in zero gravity could produce beams that existed partially outside normal space-time. The weapons could only fire once before burning out, but humanity had launched thousands of them over the decades. The first beam struck the Vorthon flagship from directly overhead. It was not the crude energy weapon the aliens used against human targets. This was a stream of pure quantum force that could rewrite matter at the subatomic level. When it touched the massive alien vessel, the ship began to dissolve molecule by molecule. General Keith watched in absolute terror as his indestructible flagship started breaking apart. The hull that could withstand direct hits from antimatter weapons began disintegrating like sugar in rain. Emergency systems screamed warnings about structural failure, cascade reactions, and imminent destruction. "Impossible," he screamed into his communication system. "No species has ever developed quantum matter displacement technology. How did these primitives create weapons that our greatest scientists consider theoretical fantasies? More beams lanced down from the sky like lightning from the gods themselves. Each satellite could only fire once, but there were thousands of them positioned in precise orbital patterns above every major population center on Earth. The night sky began to glow as beam after beam struck alien vessels. Captain Yoon Tae-ho stood on the same ridge in Nevada where he had watched the aliens demonstrate their power the day before. Now he watched alien ships fall from the sky like burning meteors. "They thought we were primitive," he said into his radio. "They had no idea that humans have been preparing for this moment since we first looked at the stars and wondered what was out there." The Vorthon fleet tried to retreat, but their ships were being targeted by ground-based versions of the same quantum technology. Dr. No Hae-jin had managed to miniaturize the quantum beam generators enough to fit them into weapons that looked like ordinary anti-aircraft guns. Every major city had dozens of them hidden in plain sight. Commander Park Hyun-woo watched from his command post as alien escape pods and smaller ships were picked off one by one. The Vorthons, who had laughed at human weapons 12 hours earlier, now fled in terror from technology they could not understand or defend against. The battle lasted only 3 hours, but when it ended, the most powerful military force in the known galaxy had been completely destroyed by a species they had dismissed as primitives with toy weapons. The sky above Earth glowed with the debris of 1,000 alien ships burning in the atmosphere. As the sun rose over a world that was still free, Commander Seo In-guk stood atop a building in Sydney, watching the last alien ships burn. "Send a message. To any Vorthan vessels still functional," he ordered. "Tell them that Earth would like to discuss terms for their surrender." 3 days later, the surviving Vorthan representatives sat across from human diplomats in a conference room in Geneva. Keth himself was among them, his arrogance replaced by a mixture of fear and respect. Ambassador Ryu Hyojin led the human delegation. "We underestimated you completely," Keth admitted, his forearms trembling slightly. "Your weapons appeared primitive to our sensors. How did you hide such advanced technology?" Dr. Park Se-jun, who had helped develop the cloaking systems, smiled. "We learned something important about warfare. The most powerful weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know exists. You scanned our equipment and saw what we wanted you to see. But your quantum displacement technology," another Vorthan officer said, "this should have taken you thousands of years to develop. How did a species that only recently achieved spaceflight create such weapons?" Professor Kim Mi-ra, elderly now but still sharp, leaned forward. "You made the same mistake that every bully makes. You assumed that because we looked weak, we were weak. But humans have something that your empire apparently lacks." "What is that?" Keth asked. "Imagination," she replied simply. "When you have conquered 1,000 worlds through superior firepower, you stop thinking of new ways to fight. You become predictable. But humans, we've been fighting each other for millennia. We know that the best way to win a war is to fight it in a way your enemy never expects." The negotiations continued for weeks. The Vorthan Empire agreed to a peace treaty, but more than that, they asked to establish trade relationships. They wanted to learn from humanity's innovative approach to technology. Major Shin Woo-jin, who had coordinated the Global Defense Network, later wrote in his memoirs, "They came expecting to conquer primitives with small guns. They left understanding that the size of a weapon matters far less than the mind that created it. Humanity didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we were smarter, more creative, and more determined than they ever imagined possible." The galaxy learned an important lesson that day. Never judge a species by the size of their guns. Judge them by their willingness to innovate when survival is on the line. And if you're facing humans who have had time to prepare, expect the impossible. In the years that followed, the phrase human engineering became synonymous throughout the galaxy with unexpected solutions to impossible problems. The Vorthan Empire never again attacked a species without first trying to understand not just their current capabilities, but their potential for innovation. And in the archives of human military history, the day became known as the moment when humanity announced itself to the galaxy not as victims, but as equals who had earned their place among the stars through ingenuity, preparation, and the refusal to be underestimated by anyone.